Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar, which is an introduction to the UK Data Service, and we're going to show you some resources for social research. So this afternoon we're going to start by having a look first of all who we are. You may be familiar with us, but just in case you're not, we'll just give you a quick overview of who we are and what we do. And then we're going to move on to have a look at what do we mean by data and have a look at some of the key types of data that we hold. We're not going to spend a lot of time on finding data purely because there is another webinar next week which is specifically on some really good search tips for finding data sources, and also it will take you through how to access the data. So we're not going to spend much time today on that. Instead, I'm going to focus on some of the online resources that we have that might be of help for you, and then I'll just tell you how you can get in touch with us if you need help at any point. Hopefully we'll have time for some questions, so if you have any questions, feel free to type them into the chat window, which you'll see on the right-hand side of your screen. We'll do the questions at the end, but feel free to type them if they occur to you as we go along, and then we'll come to those right at the end of the webinar. Okay, so who are we? So the UK Data Service is a comprehensive resource. We are funded by much of the social sciences by the ESRC. Now, our primary goal is to be a single point of access to a whole host of secondary social science data. Now, the UK Data Archive is the lead organisation, and we have a number of partners who help us run the service across the UK. Apart from just having a point of access here to data, we also provide a lot of support, training and guidance. And that can be for undergraduate students who are new to working with data right up to more experienced researchers. We find even those who have been researching for quite some time still need to get in touch and just get some guidance from us. Okay, so this is the homepage of our website, and you can see the address at the bottom of the page. As I say, we're not going to explore this too much, but I just want to point you in the direction of some useful tabs right at the very top of the screen. Now, the help one might be very important. It's certainly one of the most widely used tabs I think we have. But we also have a tab at the top for new users. So if you are completely new to us, that's a very good starting point if you want to have a look at some useful resources. Okay, so who are we for? Well, essentially we are for everybody. So a lot of our users are academic researchers and students, but we also have users from government departments, charities, business, etc. And we're finding more and more over the years that charities and government departments tend to employ their own researchers now. So we're finding more and more users from these sectors. So let's have a think about data. Now, we might think we know what data is, but it's always worth having a little look at how we define it. So we can think of data as facts or statistics that have been collected together, which we might want to use for reference or for analysis. And these are distinctive pieces of information. They're generally numeric, and that's what we're going to focus on today. But we see these in everyday life very regularly. So there'll be things on the news that you'll see talking about unemployment, how crime rates are changing, what sort of crimes are increasing, decreasing, etc. And there's also always a lot of coverage about different health conditions and the ones that are of currently most concern. Now, data is collected in a number of ways. So you might be familiar with surveys, you might have taken part in one yourself. And this is a very common way that we collect data. But there are other ways as well. So you might be familiar with our census, which happens every 10 years. You might be involved in business, and businesses are required to submit certain information about their businesses. And there's also administrative records. Now, that's the sort of thing like your education records. So if you're a student, there will be a record of your time at university, for example. There will also be records of your health, which are collected every time you go to your GP, for example. So there really is an awful lot of data out there, and some data that we may not be aware of. Now, in terms of how we get data, now you can of course collect it yourself, but this is really a very expensive process. Just in terms of money, they can be very expensive to run, but also in terms of time. And if you're very new to working with data, then trying to gain that expertise in order to design and produce a good survey can be quite problematic. For example, if you wanted to get a sample of 40,000 households, as an undergrad student, for example, is that something you could realistically do? And actually, even experienced researchers would struggle, because we have a survey which has 40,000 households in, and it's actually run by a very large research team. So there is a lot of advantage with using data that has been collected already by somebody else. And we call that secondary data analysis. Now, usually that doesn't cost you anything. And the data sets that we're going to talk to you about today, which are available through the UK Data Service, are free for you to access. So it's a very cheap option. You can find a large range of data sources. So whatever your topic, there's likely to already be some data out there. When you're analysing data, it's very important that the data set represents the population you're interested in. And that's actually quite hard to achieve. And you know that if it's a good quality social survey, then that will already have been taken care of. They also tend to be very good quality and robust data sets, and they're very transparent. So there are a lot of benefits for using existing data sources. Now, data sources can be very varied. So we have our national statistical authorities, such as the ONS, which is based at various points across the UK, but they're responsible for a lot of the official statistics that you might see. A lot of the UK government departments will produce their own data, such as the Home Office. There are some intergovernmental organisations, such as the World Bank, which produce a wide range of international data sets, and we're going to have a look at those later. But also we have some research institutes that will produce some of the large social surveys, and it's increasingly a requirement for individual researchers, if they're ESRC funded, for example, to deposit the data that they collect. So data can come from all different sources. Now, there are 4 main types of data that I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to focus a lot more on these survey microdata just because they make up the bulk of our data catalogue, but we'll have a look at the other types as well. So you might hear these terms mentioned. So we have microdata versus macrodata, and I just want to define them both if you're not familiar with them. So microdata is data which is at the individual level. So this is information about individual people. And you might use those to have a look at what factors influence health outcomes or education outcomes, for example. Macrodata, in contrast, is aggregate level data. So this is data which is at a regional or more often a country level. And these are essentially counts. And they're very useful for examining how trends such as marriage rates or fertility rates change over time. Now, they can be created from microdata sources, and that's something that you can do yourself. Okay, so let's have a look at survey microdata to start with. Now, this can be at the individual level or household level, depending on the survey, but all of the data will have been anonymised to prevent disclosure. And what we mean is that the people in that survey can't be identified from that information. These are generally very large sample sizes. They're designed to be nationally representative, and they're very, very flexible. So you can have a look at very specific subpopulations. You can have a look at things by ethnicity or by sex, depending on your topic of interest. But these are data sets which need to be analysed using a software package such as SPSS or Stata, or more increasingly people are using R. And this is really what a microdata set looks like. So this is a screenshot from SPSS, and essentially every row represents one individual. So we can see person 2 here, and every column represents a variable or a piece of information. In this case, you can see age is highlighted. So we know that we've got an individual here, age 44. And you can produce all sorts of different outputs from that. So you might want to do a simple cross-tabulation to have a look at how BMI varies across different age groups. You might want to do another comparison, but present it in a graph just to make it more visually appealing. So here we can compare gross weekly pay between men and women, for example. And these are very simple to produce, but they can be extremely effective. As you can see here, over the 10-year period, men consistently have a higher gross weekly pay. Now, many of these surveys are cross-sectional in design. They are repeated quite often annually, but it's important to note that every time they are run, they interview a completely new set of people. So the same people are never interviewed more than once. So these types of survey offer a snapshot at a specific time point. And they can cover a whole host of topics. And you can see just a few examples here. These are some of the key cross-sectional surveys that we hold data for. By far the most widely used one is the labour force survey. So let's just have a little look at some of the details for that. So the labour force survey started as an annual survey in 1975, so it's been running for a long time now. It changed to a quarterly design in 1991, and it's remained quarterly ever since. Now, the labour force survey is a very, very well-used survey, and partly it's because it allows international comparisons, because it will use the definitions for economic activity status that many countries will use as well. And it's used to inform social, economic and employment policies. Now, as the name suggests, it focuses very heavily on labour market behaviour, so they might look at occupation, income, hours of work, what sort of training you have as part of your job, but there will also be some personal and demographic characteristics, not just of the interviewee, but of the people living in the household with them. So it's a really, really high quality, valuable survey. And I want to just show you an example of some of the research that has been done using the survey. So this was a survey done by the National Foundation for Educational Research, which is based down in Slough. And there's a real policy concern at the moment with the poor retention of people in the teaching profession. So people come into teaching, but they are also leaving the profession in quite large numbers. So one of their research areas is to try and tease out why that happens. If this is an area you're interested in, then the link to the publication is at the bottom of the screen. The slides will be available tomorrow on our website, so if you're interested, you can just copy and paste the link from the slides. Now, there is another type of microdata, which is the longitudinal data. Now, these are very similar in their design, so they're individual level, large samples, etc. They're quite often repeated annually as well, but there's a really big key difference, and that is that they follow the same individuals each time. New respondents are added occasionally just to keep the sample size up, but essentially these are surveys which follow people over time. And there are two types. So we've got panel studies, which collect information regularly from the same individuals, and they help us to build up a picture of how people's lives change over time. Now, the measurement points or the survey events are called waves. Now, when the survey starts, a random selection of individuals is taken from across the whole population, and these surveys run generally for many, many years. For example, a household panel survey can run in many countries, and again, these are surveys which will allow you to do some cross-country comparison. With a panel study, the core content of the questionnaire remains the same, so that we can study changes in key measures, and that might be a key measure such as health status, employment status, etc. And here's an example. So I mentioned we had a survey which has got a sample of 40,000 households, and this is the one called Understanding Society. And it's the household panel survey, so it collects information from all of the household members. So it has around 100,000 individuals there. One of the key features as well is that it includes an ethnic minority boost. One of the key problems that you will find in survey data is that the samples will predominantly be white British, and sometimes if the sample size isn't very big, it's very difficult to get meaningful sample sizes in the ethnic minority groups. So Understanding Society is one of the surveys which has a boost, and by that I mean it overrepresents people in specific groups. And it's a really good survey if you want to do some comparison on ethnic group. It's a multi-topic survey, so it has all sorts of topics covering the whole spectrum of people's daily lives. So that might be employment. There's very, very detailed income and benefit data, but there's also attitudinal stuff, family networks, religion, etc. So it's very, very broad. It also includes a number of biomarkers. It's a very big growing area now to have a look at the relationship between biology and the social. And there are also consents to administrative data linkage. Now that's still in progress, but there is a little bit of linked data available so far, and obviously the plan is for that to increase over time. Now, another type of longitudinal study is the cohort studies. Again, they follow the same individuals over time, but instead of taking a random sample from the population, they sample individuals who have a particular event in common. Now, the most common event is that they happen to be born in the same week or the same year. And these people are then followed throughout their lifetime. They're interviewed at key time points, although generally they tend to be less frequent. But the measurement points in these surveys are called sweeps. Now, some studies will aim to follow that cohort over their entire lifetime, and there are a number of really fantastic cohort studies in the UK, which can be used together so that you can have a look at generational change. Now, with these, the content of the questionnaire is age-specific, so they will change over time to be appropriate and relevant to the age that the cohort is. Here are the three main ones that we have in the UK. They all have a sample size of between 17 and 19,000, and you can see that they're followed fairly regularly. So the earliest cohort we have data for is the 1958 National Child Development Study, and you can see here that we followed them from birth right up until the age of 60. So we really have a very, very complete picture of what their lives have been like. And this is just an example again of some research which has used two British cohort studies. And what they've tried to do is examine the effect of somebody experiencing psychological distress in childhood on the likelihood that they will be unemployed in early adulthood. And again, I've just put the link to the publication at the bottom in case you're interested. Now, cross-national surveys, I'm just going to talk about very briefly. We've obviously mentioned the idea of cross-country comparison already, but these surveys are specifically designed to allow comparisons across different countries. They're individual or household level again, and they cover a wide range of topics, and you can see the key ones here. And I've just put an example of some of the surveys at the bottom. Okay, now I'm going to shift from microdata to macrodata for a few slides. Now, international macrodata are essentially time series data that are aggregated primarily to country level, although there are a few that are regional. These are updated regularly, sometimes monthly, and these come from the international governmental organisations. There are some access restrictions on some of these still. So some may only be available to staff and students from UK institutions of higher and further education, although the move is towards opening them up more widely, and the World Bank are certainly leading that drive. But just be aware, if you're outside of UK education institutions, you may come up against some access restrictions. Now, these data banks cover a whole host of topics, so you might be interested in the Millennium Development Goals, for example, and there are plenty in the human development realm. If you're a demographer, there's plenty there for you as well. There's all sorts of things about land use and the environment, so they really are quite broad in their content. Now, these data, you don't need any software packages for this. You use them just through your normal web browser using a ukds.stat interface. It's a pretty simple system to use, although you can find a tutorial video online if you want a little bit of guidance before you get started. But you can do all sorts of things, and this is one particular output which I really like, and that's the ability to produce world maps like this so that you can compare visually difference in key measures such as life expectancy, as you can see here. And these maps are actually pretty simple to produce, but they're really, really effective at visualizing a great deal of data in one image. Okay, let's move over to census data. Now, censuses run every 10 years. They've been going in the UK since 1851, and we have data from 1971 to the most recent one. Now, the census is a gold standard data set because the aim is that it will cover the entire population. It is a questionnaire which is posted out to every household, and you are legally obliged to complete and return this form. Now, obviously, that's not 100% coverage because there will be certain groups, such as people who are currently homeless, who won't actually receive a census. So it's impossible really to get everyone, but it's as close as to a complete population as you can get. And it's used as a baseline for other statistics. So the ONS use it to produce their mid-year population estimates, for example. And you can have a look at quite detailed combinations of characteristics. You can have a look at very specific geographies. And there are 4 main outputs of census data, which I'll just discuss one by one. But if you haven't filled out a census yet, this is what the last one looked like. So it's just a paper booklet. The core topics tend to stay the same, and they don't really change over time, but very occasionally, as in the case of the last one, there were a few questions added, and you can see those highlighted in red on the screen. Now, the 4 types of census data, the first is aggregate data, and this will give you counts of people or households that have a particular combination of characteristics for particular areas. And those areas can be very large or very small. So, for example, you might want to isolate the number of people who are 50 and over and unemployed within each of the wards in the district of Greater Manchester. So you can get very, very specific with these. And again, this is something that you can access through your own web browser, so there's no software required. And the interface looks like this. Again, very simple to use, but there is a video tutorial on our website. And again, you could do something like heat maps again. You might want to have a look at how things have changed between 2 census periods, as you can see on the screen here. And again, these are relatively simple to produce. The boundary data, as I say, can be very large boundaries. So we start with the government office regions in the top left-hand corner. But you can get down to a very specific area. So in the bottom right-hand corner, you can see that's actually the Wirral, which is Liverpool. There are a whole host of different tools to enable you to use boundary data. We do have a specialist team based up in Edinburgh who are there to support people who want to use census data, specifically boundary data. So any problems, do get in touch, and I'll show you how to do that later. Now, these are quite varied, as I say. There are some very simple ones, and there are, I think, some that are more complex to use. But don't worry if you're trying to use them and you come up against some issues, just get in touch and we can guide you through. The next type of census data is the flow data. Now, this is a very specific type of aggregate data where there is a place of origin and a place of destination. And there are two types. So commuting, so that looks at where you live versus where you work, and migration, and that looks at where you are compared to where you were the year prior to the census. And again, you can access these through one of our interfaces. And the final type is the microdata. Now, this looks exactly like any of the cross-sectional surveys that you might access through us. One thing to note is you will not get the entire census as a microdata set, just because that would obviously be far too great a disclosure risk, but you will get sample of anonymized records data sets, or SARS for short. And these will give you between 1 to 5% of the population. And this you would use in the same way as you would for any social survey data. So they will be analysed through packages such as SPSS or Stata. And you can do the same sort of things as you can with a survey microdata set. Currently we have SARS data sets from 1991 onwards. Okay. Now, that's a really quick overview of the types of data that we have. Obviously, we have over 8,000 of them, so if you haven't had a chance to explore our website yet, then recommend you just sit and have a browse and just see all the different data sets we have. To access them, you will need to be registered with us, so if you're not already, then please do that. It's a very simple process. If you are at a UK university, regardless of student or staff, then you just do that using your institutional username and password. So it's very, very simple. If you're not at a UK university, then don't panic. You just need to apply for a UK Data Archive username and password. So it's the same process, but you just have one extra little step to do. This is what the registration page looks like, and it will give you some handy step-by-step guidance depending on where you're based. But you can find the link on any page and it will look something along this. So you just need to click on login and register. But that step-by-step guide is there should you need it. Okay, searching. So as I say, I'm not going to go through this in great depth because if you want more guidance, the webinar is next Thursday. Now, we like to think that we have something for everybody. So whatever discipline you're from, whether you're a historian or an economist, there will be something there for you. And half the fun, I think, is actually having a play around just to see what there is. Now, if you want to search for data, you'll see this white box on the home page. Just type in a keyword and click on the icon at the bottom, and it will bring you up some results. As I say, tune in next week on Thursday at 3 o'clock if you want some useful tips on how to maximise your searches. So the last few minutes, I'm just going to finish off by showing you some of the useful resources that we have available, and also to point you to where you need to go if you need help. So I mentioned right at the start we have a page specifically for new users. If you remember, it's on the top right-hand corner of the home page. So if you're brand new to us, then please do make the most of that. So there's guidance on how to register, the types of data, etc. We do run a number of interactive events throughout the year. So obviously, you know, we do webinars. The one that I mentioned earlier is the Finding and Accessing Data, which is next Thursday. Remember that all of these are free, so you can register for free. As I say, technology allowing, we will always record them and make them available afterwards. Now, we also do some specific ones. So some of the webinars like this is a very general introduction, but we'll do some specialised one, and it might be on a specific topic area such as health, or it might be methodological. So do keep an eye on our website for upcoming events. We also have some face-to-face events throughout the year as well, and do keep an eye on the website for any details of what's coming up. Now, there are a number of resources for helping you to use data and to get the most out of it. And this is what the page looks like, and you can see the list of options here on the left-hand side. Now, one specific thing that I want to mention, again, if you're quite new to data, this can be quite useful, and this is the data skills modules. This is a set of 3 modules. The first one is on data in general, and it focuses on cross-sectional data. The second module looks at longitudinal data, and the third looks at international macrodata. Now, each module is designed for you to dip in and out as and when you have sort of a bit of spare time, and each one should take around 2 hours to complete in total. But they can be very useful, as I say, if you're new. And it's a mixture of information and videos for you to follow. Okay, the last very, very important thing to notify you about is our user support help desk. Now, we have a number of teams, each with our own specialist area, and we're here to make sure you can get whatever support and advice that you need. So I work in the user support help desk, and me and my team are there for any data-related queries. So if you want a bit of help finding a specific data on a specific topic, and you've had a look but you can't really find anything, then let us know and we'll try and point you in the right direction. If you have found a data set, but when you start to work with it, you're not sure about what's the best specific variable for something, again, let us know and we can help. Sometimes you might find the data, you might find the variable, but you don't understand the coding frame. Again, that's the sort of thing we can help with. Sometimes you might have a look at a data set and you might think that there's a problem, or you found an anomaly, something that looks strange. Then we can have a look at that for you. And if it is a problem with the data, if there's some sort of error, we can go back to the data owners so that they're aware of that. Now, to get in touch with us, you just need to click on the help option at the top of the screen where we looked the first time. But I'm just going to get our website up now and just remind you where that option is. So it's up here, and it just says help. Okay, and that will bring you up a list of different options, and you just need to select the one that's most appropriate. And then it will bring up an online form. It's very similar to the ones that a lot of data sets, a lot of websites will have. So you just need to put a little bit of detail in, your name, etc. And then there's a box at the bottom just to put your question in. Okay, and we'll try and get back to you as soon as you can. Now, obviously, just bear in mind it can take us a little bit of time if we need to go and investigate something on your behalf. Then do give us around 4 working days for us to respond. Okay. So, let's go back to the beginning. That's where we were. Now, hopefully, that's covered all the basics for you. Now, just bear in mind that obviously, as I say, we do have a lot, so do go and have a look at the website, have a play around and a browse, and get in touch if there are any issues. I realise this is an awful lot of information in a very short space of time. So just a reminder, the slides will be available tomorrow, and we hope to have the recording up on our YouTube channel in the next week or so. Okay, so that is all I have to say in terms of content. So get in touch. There's the link for the online help forms for you. We have a Twitter page. We have a Facebook page, although I think the Twitter one is the most active one. We also have a Gistmail subscription, which you are very, very welcome to subscribe to. And this is where we notify everybody of new data sets which have been released and upcoming events. So if you want to keep an eye, then feel free to use that link to subscribe with us. Okay, are there any burning issues or questions that you have today? In which case, just type them in the chat box quickly. Failing that, okay. Nope, I think we're out of questions today. All clear, thank you. Thank you very much for that. I hope you found it very useful. I wish you all the very best in your work, your projects, and please do let us know if we can help you in the future. So I wish you a very good rest of the afternoon, and hopefully we will be in touch with you soon and we can work with you to help with your work. Thank you very much.